The crystalline spires of the archives rose like frozen tears through the perpetual mist of Centauri Prime. Elder Kavax moved their aged form through the empty halls, sensory tendrils brushing against the cold surfaces that had once hummed with life. 4,000 years of maintaining the warning had taken its toll. Where once thousands of archivists had worked, now only dozens remained. Kavax reached their monitoring station, settling their bulk into the bioorganic cradle that had molded itself to their form over centuries of use. The holographic displays shimmered to life, showing the same devastating footage they had watched countless times. The fall of the Centauri Empire, the unstoppable advance of the swarm, and the final desperate decision to send the warning to all corners of the galaxy. Station 7, reporting normal broadcast patterns. Kavax spoke into the comm system, their voice carrying the weight of millennia. The response came back weak and tired, just like everything else on their dying world. Acknowledged, Elder. Maintain the warning. Kavax's tendrils danced across the control surface, checking the quantum frequencies that carried their message across the stars. They are coming. The swarm approaches. We failed to stop them. The same words, repeated in every known language, mathematical formula, and universal constant, they could encode. Most spacefaring races had heeded their warning, abandoning their outer colonies and retreating to the galactic rim. The Centauri understood their choice. They had made the same one, after all. But today was different. The first anomaly appeared in the lower corner of Kavax's display, a signal pattern they had never seen before. Their tendrils trembled as they enhanced the reading, making sure it wasn't another echo or cosmic disturbance. Control, this is Station 7. I'm detecting an unusual response pattern on frequency band Theta 9. Investigating, came the reply, followed by a long pause. Elder, are you certain? That band has been silent for 4,000 years. Yes. Kavax's sensory nodes tingled with anticipation. But someone is there now. Someone is listening. The signal grew stronger, more focused. It carried the crude signatures of radio waves, quantum entanglement, and something else, something new. Kavax began recording as the message took shape, translating through their ancient systems. Centauri Prime, this is Dr. Amanda Reynolds of the United Earth Defense Force. We've been receiving your warning. We've been studying it. We're coming to help. Please respond. Kavax's primary heart nearly stopped. In 4,000 years of broadcasting, no one had ever offered help. They had received acknowledgments, fearful retreats, and even a few desperate prayers. But never this. Never help. Their tendrils flew across the controls, pulling up everything they knew about Earth. The data was sparse. A primitive world they had discovered 8,000 years ago, deemed too young for contact. Their species had barely mastered basic tools when the swarm came. Control, are you seeing this? Kavax's voice wavered with emotion they hadn't felt in centuries. We are, Elder. Analysis suggests the signal originates from the third planet of Sol, but that's impossible. They shouldn't have this technology. They shouldn't even have achieved spaceflight yet. Kavax watched as more data poured in. The signal carried embedded information, schematics, battle plans, and statistics that made their scientific tendrils curl in disbelief. These humans hadn't just achieved spaceflight. They had surpassed much of what the Centauri Empire had possessed at its height. Dr. Reynolds, Kavax spoke into the void, using the ancient broadcasting arrays that had only ever been used for the warning. This is Elder Kavax of the Centauri Archives. We receive you, but you must understand, the swarm destroyed our civilization at the height of our power. We cannot ask you to sacrifice yourselves. The response came back faster this time, carried on a quantum frequency that shouldn't have been possible for such a young race to master. Dr. Reynolds' voice was clear, strong, and filled with something Kavax had forgotten existed: hope. Elder Kavax, we've spent 4,000 years listening to your warning. 4,000 years preparing, building, and planning. We're not the same primitive species you once observed. We're humanity, and we don't run from fights. Even better, we learn from other people's mistakes. Hold your position. Help is coming. For the first time in 4 millennia, Elder Kovacs felt their bioluminescent patches glow with something other than sorrow. They opened a channel to all remaining archive stations and spoke words they never thought they'd say. My fellow archivists, today the warning has been answered, and it appears we have much to learn about the species we once thought too primitive to contact. The human fleet materialized at the edge of the Centauri system like ancient warriors stepping out of legend. Their ships, angular and bristling with weapons, cut striking silhouettes against the dying light of the binary stars. Elder Kovacs watched from the Archive's observation dome as 37 vessels of varying sizes took up defensive positions around their world. The flagship, Humanity's Promise, dwarfed anything the Centauri had built in their golden age. Its hull bore the scars of countless test battles, each mark a testament to humanity's relentless preparation. As Kovacs observed the fleet's precision movements, they noticed something remarkable. These ships weren't just built for war. They were built specifically for war against the swarm. Admiral Amanda Reynolds stood on her bridge, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her weathered face reflecting both authority and exhaustion. The neural interface at her temple pulsed softly as she connected with her ship's systems, a technology that had evolved from studying the fragmentary descriptions of swarm neural networks in the ancient warnings. Elder Kovacs, Reynolds spoke through the quantum comm, her voice carrying the weight of generations of preparation, requesting permission to dock at the archives. The docking procedure itself revealed volumes about humanity's approach. Their ships linked with the ancient Centauri architecture using adaptable seals, technology they had developed based solely on 4,000-year-old transmissions. They had planned for everything, even the compatibility of airlocks that had never been meant to meet. Reynolds stepped through the airlock flanked by her senior staff. Dr. Marcus Cooper, head of xenobiology, immediately began scanning the environment with devices specifically calibrated for Centauri physiology. Captain Sarah Martinez, tactical officer, studied every corner of the corridor with eyes trained to spot swarm infiltration patterns. They moved like people who had rehearsed this moment countless times, because they had. Welcome to the archives. Kovacs's translator rendered their harmonic speech into English. Though I admit, we never expected to welcome anyone again. Reynolds approached the elder, her steps confident despite the unfamiliar gravity. We've spent generations preparing for this moment, Elder. My grandmother, Dr. Elizabeth Reynolds, was the first to decode the complex emotional harmonics in your warning. She realized your people weren't just broadcasting information. You were trying to save lives. Kovacs's sensory tendrils wavered in surprise. You decoded our emotional subsignals. Even some of our colony worlds struggled with that. My mother, Catherine Reynolds, dedicated her life to understanding your technology. Amanda continued, retrieving a small device from her uniform pocket. It projected a holographic display of combat simulations, millions of them, running simultaneously. She developed our quantum shields based on fragmentary descriptions in your transmissions. Each generation of my family, and countless others, contributed to this mission. The simulation showed human ships engaging with theoretical swarm formations, each scenario tested and refined over centuries. Kovacs watched as virtual battles played out, showing strategies they had never considered. But why? The elder's question echoed through the chamber. Why commit so many resources, so many years, to fighting someone else's war? Reynolds smiled, but her eyes remained serious. Because that's what humans do. We saw a civilization in need, a threat to all life, and we chose to stand and fight. We don't accept defeat, even someone else's defeat. Dr. Cooper stepped forward, his scanners humming. Admiral, these readings match our projections. The Archive's defense systems can be integrated with our network. Captain Martinez added, structural integrity of the outer walls is within acceptable parameters. We can begin installing the shield generators immediately. Reynolds turned back to Kovacs. Elder, humanity spent 4,000 years turning your warning into our training manual. Every scrap of information, every detail about the swarm's tactics became part of our military doctrine. We didn't just prepare for this fight. We've been living it, breathing it, for generations. Kovacs moved closer to the holographic display, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with cautious hope. You truly believe you can succeed where we failed? Elder, Reynolds said, her voice firm with conviction. We didn't come here to try. We came here to win. The swarm evolved to counter elegant, advanced civilizations like yours, but they've never faced anything like humanity. A species that turned their own primitive history of warfare into an advantage. She gestured to her crew, each member a specialist in combating an enemy they had never seen but had studied their entire lives. We're not just fighting for Earth or even for Centauri Prime. We're fighting for every species that was forced to run, every civilization the swarm destroyed. And this time, they're the ones who won't see us coming. The ancient Centauri war chamber hummed to life for the first time in millennia, its crystalline walls glowing with holographic displays. Lieutenant Jack Martinez stood at the center of the room, his hands dancing through the air as he manipulated the tactical projections. Around him, Centauri elders watched with their sensory tendrils extended in fascination as he demonstrated humanity's battle plans. The swarm's primary advantage has always been their neural network, Martinez explained, his young face illuminated by the swirling holographic patterns. They think and act as one. Previous civilizations saw this as an insurmountable advantage. He paused, a confident smile crossing his face. We saw it as their greatest weakness. Admiral Reynolds stood at the back of the chamber, watching her prodigy with pride. Martinez had graduated top of his class at the Centauri Defense Academy, an Earth institution named aspirationally centuries before this moment. Now he was finally putting that training to use in the very room it was designed to simulate. Their perfect coordination means perfect predictability, Martinez continued, pulling up combat footage from the archives records. Elder Kovacs, could you confirm the timestamp of this attack pattern? Kovacs moved forward, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with recognition. The fall of Proxima Colony, 3,247 years ago. We lost 10,000 ships that day. Martinez nodded grimly. Watch what happens when we apply our chaos theory algorithms to the same scenario. The holographic display shifted, showing human ships moving in seemingly random patterns that somehow perfectly countered the swarm's formation. Every time they optimize, we randomize. Every time they adapt, we throw out the rulebook and write a new one. Captain Sarah Martinez, Jack's older sister, stepped forward from her position near the tactical display. We've run this simulation millions of times, accounting for every recorded swarm adaptation in your archives. Our ships are designed to be unpredictable. Each captain has full autonomy to deviate from any strategy the moment the swarm starts to adapt to it. Elder Kovacs' tendrils writhed in confusion. But without central coordination, how can you maintain an effective defense? By trusting in chaos, Jack replied, pulling up a new simulation. Humans have been fighting each other since we first picked up sticks and stones. We learned something your civilization never had to, how to think like individuals while fighting as a group. The display showed hundreds of smaller simulations running simultaneously, each one showing a different approach to the same battle scenario. Some succeeded brilliantly, others failed catastrophically, but each failure fed data back into the system, improving the next iteration. This is how we've spent 4,000 years, Admiral Reynolds explained, moving to stand beside her officers. While the rest of the galaxy ran, we turned your warning into the greatest military training program in human history. Every child who grew up wanting to be a soldier trained against the swarm. Every tactical officer learned to think like them, and then learned to think unlike anything they'd expect. Dr. Cooper entered the war chamber, his datapad displaying fresh analysis. Admiral, the integration of human tactical systems with Centauri sensor arrays is proceeding ahead of schedule. Their quantum crystalline architecture is surprisingly compatible with our neural interfaces. Not surprising at all, Jack interjected, grinning. We designed our systems to be compatible with technology we'd only seen in 4,000-year-old transmissions. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology. It's our preparation. Elder Kivaks moved to the central platform, their massive form casting shadows through the holographic displays. In all our history, no species has ever done what humanity has done. You didn't just hear our warning. You made it your purpose. Because that's who we are. Sarah Martins responded, her voice firm. When we look into the darkness of space, we don't see something to fear. We see something to overcome. Every other species asked, how can we survive? Humans asked, how can we win? Admiral Reynolds watched as her officers continued explaining their strategies to the amazed elders. In all the simulations, in all the planning, they had never fully imagined this moment, standing in the actual war chamber of Centauri Prime, preparing to defend it against an enemy that had haunted two civilizations. Lieutenant, she called out, interrupting Jack's enthusiastic explanation of fractal combat patterns. Show them Operation Thunderbolt. Jack's eyes lit up as he input the commands. Now this, he said, as new holographic ships appeared in formation, is how humanity fights back. Admiral Reynolds traced her gloved hand along the crystalline walls of the lower archives, following the pulsing bioluminescent paths that seemed to respond to her touch. Elder Kivaks glided beside her, their sensory tendrils extended in curiosity as the human's neural interface synchronized with the ancient Centauri technology. These chambers haven't been accessed since the fall, Kivaks explained, their translator struggling to convey the deep melancholy in their harmonics. Our greatest weapons, our most advanced research, all sealed away when we realized victory was impossible. Reynolds paused at an intersection where the crystals grew in complex fractal patterns. Her neural interface hummed, processing the quantum signatures embedded in the structure. Not impossible, Elder. Just impossible for a single civilization fighting alone. Behind them, Dr. Cooper's scanning equipment chirped insistently. Admiral, these readings, they're off the charts. The crystalline matrices aren't just data storage. They're living technology. Biotech, Reynolds murmured, her eyes distant as she processed data through her neural link. Your people found a way to merge biological and crystalline systems, didn't you? Kivaks's bioluminescence flickered in surprise. Yes, but that knowledge was lost with our weapon facilities. How did you? Because we developed something similar, Reynolds smiled, tapping her neural interface. Completely independently, but following the same principles we gleaned from your transmissions. The human brain is remarkably adaptable. Once we understood the concept of living crystal, we found our own path to it. The Admiral pressed her palm flat against a particularly complex crystal formation. Her neural interface pulsed, and the wall responded, channels of light spreading out from her touch. Ancient doors groaned open, revealing a vast chamber filled with suspended animation pods. Elder, Reynolds breathed, what is this place? Kivaks moved forward, their tendrils trembling. The Genesis Vault, our last resort weapons development facility. But there's something wrong. These systems should be dormant, not active. Dr. Cooper rushed forward, his scanners whirring. These pods are running some kind of simulation. They'd been running it for 4,000 years. His face paled. Admiral, you need to see this data. Now. Reynolds connected to Cooper's feed through her neural interface, and her expression hardened. Elder, your weapons facilities weren't just sealed. They were studying the swarm, running predictions, simulations, analyzing their patterns of evolution. Evolution. Kivaks's translator crackled with alarm. The swarm was devastating enough in its original form, are you saying? They're not coming back the same as they left, Reynolds finished grimly. Your systems have been tracking their probable mutations, their adaptations. The swarm we're about to face isn't the same one that destroyed your civilization. They're stronger, smarter, more adaptive. The chamber hummed with nervous energy as Reynolds paced, her mind racing through combat scenarios. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. "Admiral," Cooper asked, concerned. "Don't you see?" Reynolds turned to face them, her eyes bright with realization. "This is perfect. The swarm evolved to be more adaptive, more unpredictable. They've spent 4,000 years becoming more like us." She activated her command frequency. "Lieutenant Martinez, Captain Martinez, get down to the Genesis vault. Bring your tactical teams. The game has changed, but for once, it's changed in our favor." Kavax's tendrils twisted in confusion. How can this possibly be good news? Because, Reynolds explained, her hands flying over the ancient control surfaces as her neural interface translated them. "Your civilization fell because you fought the swarm with order and logic. Perfect strategies against their perfect coordination. But humans," she grinned, "we've spent our entire history fighting chaos with chaos. The more unpredictable they've become, the more they've evolved into something we already know how to beat." The pods around them pulsed with new energy as Reynolds integrated their data with her ship's tactical systems. "Elder, your people created something brilliant here, a prediction engine that mapped out the swarm's evolution. You thought you were documenting your failure, but you were actually giving us the blueprint for victory." She turned to face the Elder, her expression fierce with determination. "The swarm thinks they've spent 4,000 years becoming unstoppable, but all they've really done is spend 4,000 years becoming exactly what humanity has always been best at fighting, themselves." Commander Tom Bradley stood on the bridge of the Stalker, his stealth frigate hidden in the shadow of a shattered moon. The debris field around them had once been Centauri Prime's outer defense ring. Now it served a new purpose, camouflage for humanity's hunters. "Contact," his sensor officer whispered, though sound couldn't travel in space. Old habits died hard. 3 swarm scout vessels, approaching on Vector 217. Bradley allowed himself a small smile. The swarm was running their standard reconnaissance pattern, just as humanity had predicted they would. 4,000 years hadn't changed their basic tactical doctrine. Why should it? No one had ever survived long enough to exploit it. "All ships, maintain emission control," he subvocalized through his neural link to the wolf pack. 5 stealth frigates scattered throughout the debris field. "Let them pass through the primary sensor grid." The swarm scouts moved with inhuman precision, their biomechanical ships flowing through space like liquid metal. They were beautiful, in their own terrifying way. Bradley had spent his entire career studying them in simulations, but seeing them in reality made his heart race. "Grid confirmation," his tactical officer reported. "We have their neural signature mapped. They're operating on the evolved frequency bands, just as the Genesis vault predicted." Bradley nodded. "Execute Protocol Shadowhunter, just like we practiced." Across the debris field, 5 human ships simultaneously activated their quantum disruptors, technology reverse-engineered from fragments of Centauri research and 4 millennia of human innovation. The effect was instantaneous. The swarm scouts froze, their neural network suddenly fragmented by frequencies they had never encountered. In the 4,000 years since they had destroyed the Centauri Empire, no one had ever dared to fight back. No one had ever studied them enough to know they could be disrupted. "Weapons free," Bradley commanded. "Show them what Earth wolves can do." The Stalker emerged from the shadows, its stealth systems powered down as it revealed itself to its prey. The ship's design was deliberately brutal, all sharp angles and matte black surfaces, the product of engineers who had spent generations designing the perfect predator for this exact moment. Particle beams lanced out from multiple vectors as Bradley's wolf pack executed a perfectly coordinated attack. The swarm scouts, operating on individual backup protocols without their neural link, responded with predictable desperation. "They're calling for reinforcements," the comms officer announced. "Good." Bradley's smile grew darker. "Admiral Reynolds, Phase 1 is complete. The bait has been taken." From her command post in the archives, Reynolds watched the tactical display with Elder Kovacs. Confirmed, Commander. Your wolf pack performed exactly as expected. Fall back to secondary positions. Kovacs's tendrils twisted in agitation. You deliberately revealed your presence. The swarm will send everything they have. That's the plan. Bradley's voice came through the quantum comm. For 4,000 years, they'd grown stronger by absorbing the technologies of the civilizations they've destroyed. But they've never encountered an enemy that was counting on that. The tactical display lit up with hundreds of new contacts as the swarm's main force began emerging from hyperspace. Their ships were different from the records in the archives, more organic, more fluid in their movements. They had evolved, just as the Genesis Vault had predicted. Battle stations, Reynolds commanded, her voice carrying across all human frequencies. All ships, execute Operation Thunderbolt. Remember your training. Remember what we came here for. Bradley watched as his wolf pack disappeared back into the debris field, their stealth systems engaging as they prepared for the real fight. The swarm's main force was spreading out in their standard attack formation, a formation that humanity had spent centuries learning to counter. Commander, his tactical officer called out, the swarm ships, they're adapting already, changing their neural frequencies. Let them adapt, Bradley replied, thinking of all the generations of his family who had trained for this moment. His grandfather had commanded simulated wolf packs. His mother had refined the stealth systems. Now he would prove their faith in humanity's cause wasn't wasted. This isn't just about survival anymore, he broadcast to his pack. This is about showing the galaxy that humanity doesn't just endure. We protect. We defend. We fight back. Now, let's show these hive-minded bastards what Earth's pack hunters can do. Dr. Kate Sullivan stood in the neural integration chamber deep within the archives, her mind linked directly to the quantum battlefield through her enhanced interface. Around her, holographic displays showed the chaos of combat from a perspective no human had ever witnessed before, the actual thought patterns of the swarm. Their neural network isn't just a communication system, she announced, her voice carrying to both the command center and the fleet. It's their consciousness, their reality. Her fingers danced through the air, manipulating the quantum signals. And we're about to rewrite it. Admiral Reynolds watched from her command post as Sullivan's team initiated Operation Chaos Theory. Elder Kovacs, you're about to see why we chose a xenopsychologist as our secret weapon. The massive holographic display showed Bradley's wolf pack executing seemingly random attack patterns, while Sullivan's quantum signals played havoc with the swarm's neural network. Ships that had moved in perfect harmony for millennia began to break formation. The swarm operates on pure logic, Sullivan explained, her eyes closed as she directed the quantum assault. Their strength comes from their unity, their perfect coordination. But humans? She smiled, though sweat beaded on her forehead from the neural strain. We're gloriously, effectively illogical. Through the quantum network, Sullivan broadcast contradictory sensor data to different segments of the swarm fleet. Some ships detected threats that didn't exist. Others saw their allies as enemies. The perfect order of their neural network became their greatest vulnerability. Look at their response patterns, Sullivan directed, highlighting clusters of swarm ships on the tactical display. 4,000 years of evolution, and they still can't process true randomness. They're trying to find a logic in our chaos. Commander Bradley's voice crackled through the comm. Dr. Sullivan, the disruption is working. Their formations are breaking down, but they're adapting faster than the simulations predicted. Of course they are, Sullivan replied, her fingers never stopping their dance through the quantum interface. Because they're learning. But so are we. She turned to Admiral Reynolds. Permission to implement Protocol Babel. Reynolds studied the tactical display for a long moment. Protocol Babel was theoretical, developed from decades of studying the swarm's linguistic patterns and their neural communications. No one knew if it would work in practice. The Genesis Vault data confirms it, Sullivan pressed. The swarm's evolution made them more sophisticated, but it also made them more vulnerable to cognitive disruption. They're not just a hive mind anymore. They're a civilization unto themselves, and every civilization has its breaking points. Reynolds nodded. Do it. Sullivan's team activated their quantum transmitters, broadcasting directly into the swarm's neural network. Not just signals this time, but ideas, concepts, questions that had no answers, paradoxes that couldn't be resolved. What you're seeing, Sullivan explained to the amazed Centauri elders, is the first true communication anyone has ever had with the swarm. We're not just fighting them, we're making them think. On the tactical display, swarm ships began moving in increasingly erratic patterns. Some stopped completely. Others fired on their own companions. They've spent 4,000 years consuming technologies, adapting, evolving, Sullivan continued. But they never evolved the one thing that makes humanity unique, our ability to embrace contradiction, to act without perfect logic, to thrive in chaos. Elder Kovacs's tendrils twisted in amazement. You're not just disrupting their coordination, you're introducing them to doubt. Exactly. Sullivan's smile was fierce. Every civilization we studied in human history had to face this moment. The realization that perfect order is impossible. That consciousness itself is built on paradox and uncertainty. The swarm never had to face that truth until now. Through the quantum link, they could all see it, the first cracks appearing in the swarm's unified consciousness. 4,000 years of perfect certainty confronted with questions it had never needed to answer. Commander Bradley, Reynolds ordered, concentrate your attacks on the ships showing the most neural disruption. Dr. Sullivan pushed the paradox signals to maximum. Admiral, Bradley responded, the swarm's flagship is changing course. They're retreating. Sullivan shook her head, her neural interface pulsing with activity. Not retreating. Regrouping. They need time to process what we've shown them, but they'll be back. She turned to face Reynolds, her expression grim but determined. And when they return, they'll be bringing something new to this fight. Fear. The swarm returned with the fury of a wounded god. Their ships had transformed. The biomechanical structures now twisted into shapes that defied physics. An external manifestation of the cognitive chaos Dr. Sullivan had introduced to their neural network. Admiral Reynolds stood at the command center, her neural interface processing battlefield data as she coordinated humanity's forces. All ships, execute formation Delta. Bradley's wolf packs, maintain stealth positions. Dr. Sullivan, status of Protocol Babel. Their neural patterns are evolving, Sullivan reported from the integration chamber, her voice tense with concentration. They're attempting to compartmentalize their consciousness, creating isolated networks to resist our paradox signals. Lieutenant Jack Martinez's tactical display showed the swarm's new formation, a writhing mass of ships that moved like a storm of angry wasps. They're not just adapting anymore, he observed. They're improvising. Good. Reynolds smiled grimly. That's exactly what we wanted. Captain Martinez launched the Thunderbolt squadrons. Sarah Martinez's voice crackled through the quantum comm as her heavy assault ships emerged from behind Centauri Prime's shattered moons. Thunderbolt squadron, weapons free. Show them what 4,000 years of preparation looks like. The battle erupted across space like a symphony of destruction. Human ships moved in patterns that appeared chaotic, but were actually the product of centuries of strategic evolution. Each apparent mistake was a trap, each retreat a prelude to ambush. Elder Kovacs watched in awe as the humans executed their master strategy. Your ships, they're fighting like the swarm now. No, Reynolds corrected, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. The swarm is fighting like us. That's why they're going to lose. Through the quantum network, Sullivan's team continued their psychological assault. But this time, instead of broadcasting paradoxes, they transmitted something else. Memories. The collected experiences of humanity's long preparation for this moment. Let them see, Sullivan commanded. Let them understand what they're really fighting. The swarm's neural network absorbed the data stream. Generations of human children training in combat simulators, scientists dedicating their lives to understanding Centauri technology, families passing down the mission from parent to child. 4,000 years of relentless preparation distilled into a single message. Humanity had never feared the swarm. They had been eagerly waiting for this moment. Commander Bradley's wolf packs struck from multiple vectors, their stealth systems allowing them to close distance before the swarm could react. Primary targets acquired, he reported. Executing neural spike attack. The quantum disruptors fired, their effects amplified by Sullivan's psychological warfare. Swarm ships began firing on each other, their compartmentalized neural networks turning isolation into vulnerability. They're attempting to reestablish their primary neural link, Sullivan reported. Now, Admiral. Reynolds activated her command override. All ships, execute final protocol. Lieutenant Martinez, you have control of the Genesis network. Jack's hands flew across his console as he activated the weapon they'd spent months preparing in secret. The crystalline structures of the archives pulsed with new energy as ancient Centauri technology merged with human innovation. Genesis Network Online, he announced, transmitting quantum override signals. Now, the space around Centauri Prime lit up with quantum energy as every crystal in the archive system activated simultaneously. The swarmed ships froze in space as their neural network was overwhelmed, not by chaos, but by unity, the combined consciousness of human determination and Centauri technology. Their network is compromised, Sullivan reported, her voice tight with effort as she directed the quantum assault. We're not just disrupting them anymore, we're rewriting them. Reynolds watched as the swarm's mighty armada began to break apart, not in defeat, but in transformation. This was never about destroying them, she explained to Kovacs. It was about teaching them something they never learned in 4,000 years of evolution, the power of choice. Through the quantum network, humanity offered the swarm what no species had ever given them before, an alternative to endless consumption. The knowledge of cooperation, of growth through collaboration rather than conquest. They're receiving the signal, Sullivan announced, wonder in her voice. They're understanding. The battle that had been 4,000 years in the making ended not with destruction, but with revelation. The swarmed ships hung in space, their neural network processing a fundamental change in their collective consciousness. Reynolds turned to Elder Kovacs, her expression both tired and triumphant. Now shall we begin the real work of rebuilding the galaxy. 6 months after the Battle of Centauri Prime. Admiral Amanda Reynolds stood in the rebuilt Grand Chamber of the Archives. The crystalline walls had been restored to their former glory, now enhanced with human quantum technology. Through the vast observation windows, she could see the combined fleet of human and reformed swarm ships patrolling the system together. Elder Kovacs glided forward, their bioluminescent patches glowing with pride as they presented Reynolds with the stellar crown, the highest honor in Centauri history. In 4,000 years, no one has ever earned this honor. But then again, no species has ever done what humanity achieved. Reynolds accepted the crown, its living crystal adapting to interface with her neural implant. We didn't just win a battle, Elder. We changed the rules of warfare itself. The swarm taught us that victory doesn't always mean destruction. Dr. Sullivan, now heading the Joint Species Communication Initiative, stepped forward. Her neural interface had evolved, incorporating elements of both Centauri crystal tech and reformed swarm biology. The latest reports from the outer colonies are promising. More species are returning every day. They're calling it the Great Homecoming. Commander Bradley, his wolf pack now serving as escorts for returning refugee fleets, joined them at the observation window. Hard to believe it sometimes. 4,000 years of preparation, and we ended up not just fighting the enemy, but transforming them. Through the quantum network that now connected all three species, they could feel the presence of the reformed swarm consciousness. No longer a force of mindless consumption, but a collective intelligence that had learned the value of diversity and choice. The real victory, Lieutenant Jack Martinez observed from his new post at the Combined Fleet Academy, wasn't in our weapons or strategies. It was in showing the swarm a better way to evolve. Sarah Martinez, now fleet captain of the Joint Human Swarm Patrol Force, added, and in showing the galaxy that running away isn't the only option when facing seemingly impossible odds. Reynolds watched as a group of young cadets, human, Centauri, and reformed swarm, trained together in the Archive's simulation chambers. We're building something new here, something that's never existed before in the history of any of our species. Kavax's tendrils moved in what humans had learned was their expression of joy. When we sent out our warning 4,000 years ago, we hoped someone would survive. We never imagined someone would answer. Never dreamed that the primitive species we once overlooked would become not just our saviors, but our teachers. The quantum network hummed with activity as more refugee ships appeared at the system's edge. Each day brought new returns, new reunions, new opportunities for rebuilding. The reformed swarm ships would escort them home, a living testament to the power of transformation. You know what the other species keep asking me? Reynolds smiled, watching the returns. They want to know how we did it. How humans had the courage to spend 4,000 years preparing for a fight that most of the galaxy ran from. And what do you tell them? Sullivan asked, though she already knew the answer. I tell them the truth, that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology, our weapons, or even our strategies. It's our stubborn refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. Reynolds turned to face the gathered leaders. We didn't just prepare to fight the swarm. We prepared to change the very nature of conflict itself. Elder Kavax moved to the central platform, their voice carrying to all present through the quantum network. Let the record show that on this day, we do not merely celebrate a victory. We celebrate the birth of a new age. An age where three species who once would have destroyed each other now stand together as guardians of peace. The quantum network resonated with agreement from all connected species. The former swarm ships pulsed with new colors, their biomechanical forms now expressing creativity and individuality within their collective consciousness. Reynolds looked out at the stars, thinking of all the generations of humans who had dedicated their lives to this moment. The galaxy once feared the silence of space. Now, let them hear a new message. In darkness, there is light. In conflict, there is opportunity. And in the face of impossible odds, there is always hope if you're stubborn enough to forge it yourself.